The Smokies are the most visited national park in America, and that is exactly why nobody looks twice. 12 million people a year walk these trails, past the overlooks, past the waterfalls, past the wildflower meadows everyone stops to photograph. And the crowd itself becomes a kind of camouflage. You assume that many people can't be wrong about a place feeling safe, but the black bear population here is one of the densest in the country, and the animals learned the trail system before you did. They know exactly which switchback has the granola bar wrapper and which overlook empties out at dusk. Locals who live at the edge of this park don't measure danger by how crowded a trail looks. They measure it by how comfortable the animals have gotten with the crowd itself. Here are 14 animals sharing these mountains with you, starting with the ones buried in leaf litter and porch corners that most visitors never think to check for. The timber rattlesnake is the largest venomous snake in the eastern United States, and the Smokies sit well within its range, patient, well camouflaged against dead leaves and rocky outcrops along mid-elevation trails. This is not an aggressive species by nature. It would rather freeze and rely on camouflage than strike, which is exactly why so many close encounters happen when a hiker steps within inches of one without ever noticing it was there. The venom is potent and tissue destroying, and a bite from a large adult can deliver a serious dose, which is why longtime park rangers teach the same habit to every new hire: step onto a log or a rock before stepping over it, never blind. What makes this species particularly easy to walk past unnoticed is how well it holds still, even when a hiker's boot lands within inches, relying entirely on camouflage rather than flight, which means the animal that never moved is often the one nobody remembers seeing at all. Where the timber rattlesnake claims the rocky overlooks, the copperhead claims almost everywhere else. This is the snake responsible for more bites across the Smokies and the broader Appalachian region than any other species, precisely because it doesn't need deep wilderness. It thrives at campground edges, along creek banks, and in the leaf litter bordering nearly every popular trailhead in the park. Its copper and hourglass pattern disappears almost perfectly against fallen leaves, and the bite, while rarely fatal to a healthy adult, is excruciating enough that park medical staff treat more copperhead encounters every season than any other venomous animal on this list. The irony locals point to often is that copperhead bites cluster not in the deep backcountry, but right at the edges of the most developed parts of the park, the exact spots where visitors have let their guard down because everything around them looks manicured and safe. Black widow spiders build their webs in exactly the places millions of Smokies visitors never think to check: the underside of a picnic table, a stacked woodpile at a campsite, the dark corner of a bathhouse. Their neurotoxic venom causes severe muscle cramping and abdominal pain intense enough to be mistaken for a medical emergency of a different kind entirely, and campground staff across the park deal with far more black widow encounters than the average visitor would ever guess, simply because the park's high foot traffic means more disturbed webs every single day. A first time camper reaching for firewood stacked against a picnic table rarely thinks to check the underside first, and that single habit, or the lack of it, is often the entire difference between an uneventful trip and an emergency room visit. The brown recluse rounds out the park's hidden venom threat. Small, tan, and unremarkable enough to go completely unnoticed until it's already pressed against skin. It doesn't build an obvious web, instead hiding in stacked firewood, folded tents, and gear left untouched for a few days at a campsite. Its cytotoxic venom can create a slow-spreading wound that takes months to heal, and the classic Smoky's encounter isn't a hiker in the open. It's someone reaching into a duffel bag or a boot that's been sitting in a dark corner of a cabin or tent since the trip began. Multi-day backpackers are especially at risk simply because gear sits untouched for longer stretches, giving a recluse plenty of time to settle into a fold of fabric before anyone reaches back in. And then there's the danger that doesn't wait for you to notice it at all. The Smokies sit inside one of the densest tick corridors on the eastern seaboard, and every one of those 12 million annual visitors walking through tall grass or brushing past trailside vegetation is a potential host. Lyme disease circulates through the region's tick population alongside other tick-borne illnesses, and the classic transmission window closes quietly, hours after a bite that most people never feel happening. Rangers throughout the park recommend a full-body tick check after every hike for exactly this reason, because the danger here isn't dramatic, it's patient, and it doesn't need you to see it coming. 12 million visitors a year means 12 million opportunities for a tick to find a new host, and the ones who never bother checking are, statistically, the ones most likely to be carrying an unwelcome passenger home without ever knowing it happened. Those 5 hide in the leaf litter and the woodpile, easy to miss entirely, in a park built around wide, well-marked trails. What comes next is different. Animals that haven't just adapted to 12 million annual visitors, they've learned to profit from them. The black bear population in the Smokies is one of the densest anywhere in North America, packed into a relatively small protected area that also happens to be the most visited national park in the country. That combination has produced something unusual: bears that have grown remarkably comfortable around people, learning trail patterns, campground schedules, and even which parking areas tend to have unattended coolers. Most encounters end without incident because a healthy wild bear still generally wants distance from a crowd. But the ones that have learned differently, the ones conditioned by years of improperly stored food and careless visitors, behave nothing like the cautious animal most hikers picture, and park rangers spend enormous resources every season trying to reverse habituation that took years to build and can undo an entire bear's natural wariness in a single unlocked cooler. Once a bear associates a parking lot or a picnic area with an easy meal, that association rarely goes away on its own, which is why relocated bears frequently find their way back to the exact spot they were removed from, sometimes traveling considerable distances to do it. Researchers who track individual bears through the park's dense population have documented the same animal returning to a specific trailhead across multiple seasons, a pattern that looks less like instinct and more like memory. Raccoons might be the most underestimated animal in the entire park, familiar enough that most visitors treat them as a novelty rather than a genuine risk. Smoky's raccoons have grown bold around campsites, raiding coolers and food bags with a persistence that borders on fearless. And while most encounters are simply annoying, raccoons remain one of the most common rabies vectors in the eastern United States. A raccoon behaving aggressively in daylight, showing no fear of people, or moving erratically is exhibiting exactly the warning signs park rangers train staff to recognize and report immediately. It's a strange contradiction most visitors never think about. The same wide-eyed, almost cartoonish animal photographed at nearly every campsite in the park is also one of the leading rabies carriers in the entire region. Coyotes have expanded steadily through the Smokies over the past several decades, adapting to trail corridors and campground edges with the same opportunistic ease they've shown across the rest of the country. Direct threats to adult hikers remain limited, but coyotes accustomed to human food sources have grown bold enough in some sections of the park to approach unattended pets and even people expecting a handout, a behavior wildlife officials actively discourage visitors from reinforcing by feeding them, intentionally or not. A coyote that's learned to associate a specific picnic area or trailhead with food will often return to that exact spot for months, which means one careless visitor can quietly reshape how an entire section of the park behaves toward everyone who follows. Bobcats move through the Smokies' dense forest largely unseen, solitary and built for ambush rather than open pursuit. Encounters with hikers are rare, and a healthy bobcat wants nothing to do with a person on a trail, but a rabid or genuinely cornered bobcat is capable of serious lacerations, and park staff treat any bobcat approaching rather than fleeing as a potential rabies case requiring an immediate report. Most visitors who spend years hiking the park's backcountry never see one at all, which says less about how rare bobcats actually are and more about how effectively this particular predator has mastered staying unseen in a park this crowded. Skunks round out the park's food-conditioned tier, common enough around campgrounds and picnic areas that most visitors barely register them as wildlife at all. Beyond the obvious spray, which is unpleasant but not dangerous on its own, skunks are another significant rabies vector in the region, and an unusually aggressive or disoriented skunk approaching in daylight is treated by park staff as a genuine health concern rather than a nuisance animal to shoo away. Because skunks are nocturnal by nature, any sighting during full daylight is itself a warning sign worth taking seriously, one that most casual visitors have no idea to look for. Those five explain why the Smokies' food conditioning problem runs deeper than just the bears everyone already worries about. What's left are the animals capable of doing serious damage through size and force alone, and the numbers back up just how often that happens here. Feral hogs have become one of the most persistent and expensive wildlife problems across both Tennessee and North Carolina, and the Smokies are no exception. Descended from escaped domestic pigs and Eurasian boar released for hunting generations ago, these animals travel in family groups, tear through understory vegetation searching for food, and a cornered hog or a sow protecting piglets will charge without hesitation, using tusks capable of serious lacerations. Park biologists have spent decades trying to control the population through trapping and removal with limited long-term success, and hikers on backcountry trails are taught to recognize fresh rooting in the soil as a sign that hogs have been active nearby recently. Unlike the park's bears, feral hogs have shown almost no interest in becoming comfortable around people, which in some ways makes them more predictable. But a surprise sounder crossing a trail at close range remains one of the more genuinely alarming encounters a Smokies hiker can have, especially with piglets in the group. White-tailed deer might be the animal visitors take least seriously on this entire list, and that underestimation causes real harm every single year. During the fall rut, bucks become measurably more aggressive, and vehicle collisions involving deer spike dramatically on the roads winding through and around the park, some of the most dangerous stretches of highway in the region during peak rutting season. Beyond the road risk, a buck defending territory during rut has charged hikers who got too close without recognizing the warning signs, a reminder that even the park's most familiar, least feared animal carries real risk during certain seasons. Visitors who've grown up seeing deer as background scenery rather than wildlife are exactly the ones least likely to notice a buck's stiff-legged posture or lowered head before it's already closing the distance. Elk were reintroduced to the Smokies after being absent from the region for well over a century, and the population has grown into one of the park's signature wildlife viewing draws. That popularity has created its own problem, crowds gathering close for photos during the fall rut, when bulls competing for territory become dramatically more aggressive and unpredictable. Rangers now regularly close viewing areas and rope off safe distances during peak rut season, specifically because visitors have repeatedly underestimated how fast and how far an agitated bull elk will charge when it feels crowded or challenged. The animals themselves seem to have adjusted faster than the visitors have. Several bulls in the park's core viewing areas have grown so accustomed to crowds that they'll bugle and display within feet of a rope line, which only reinforces the exact false sense of safety that gets people hurt. It's 13 animals capable of causing real harm across this park: venom, disease, tusks, hooves, and teeth. And if you had to guess which threat actually defines the Smokies' real danger, your mind probably went straight to the biggest, most obvious animal on this entire list: the black bear standing at the edge of a campsite. You'd be right about the animal and wrong about why. The true number one danger in the Smokies isn't the black bear because it's the largest predator in the park. It's the black bear because it's the most conditioned one, an animal that has spent generations learning this exact trail system, this exact parking lot schedule, this exact pattern of when a cooler gets left unattended. A wild black bear that's never encountered a person is genuinely cautious, wanting distance the moment it senses you're there. A Smokies bear that's learned 12 million visitors a year means a reliable, repeating food source behaves like an entirely different animal, patient, familiar with the terrain, and willing to approach in ways its wild instincts would otherwise prevent. That's not a story about size or teeth. It's a story about education, and the uncomfortable truth is that the education has been happening on the bear's side of the equation the entire time. Consider what that actually means for the numbers behind this list. Every other animal here, the rattlesnake, the copperhead, the hog, the elk, causes harm the same way it always has, through instinct, through territory, through a startled or defensive reaction. The black bear is the only entry that's actively adapting its behavior in response to human presence, getting measurably better at exploiting the park's crowds with each passing season. That's a fundamentally different kind of danger than anything else on this countdown, not a fixed risk to be avoided, but a moving target that's learning faster than most visitors realize. And that's the real shape of the thesis this whole list has been building toward. The Smokies crowds feel like safety. 12 million people a year can't all be walking into danger, surely. But that same crowd is exactly what's been teaching the park's wildlife, which trail has the dropped snack, which overlook empties out fastest at dusk, which parking area has the unattended cooler. They learned the trail system before you did, and every season they get a little better at it. The next visitor who walks past a switchback without a second glance isn't wrong to feel safe surrounded by that many people. They're just wrong about what the crowd has actually been teaching the animals watching from just off the trail. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like